The galactic concord was dying, and everyone in the grand chamber knew it. Lights dimmed in the vast marble-colored hall as the holograms flickered. 5 core systems gone, entire civilizations reduced to static on the comm grid. All because of the Skarath. The insectoid monsters had come without warning, without negotiation, without mercy, consuming planets with a swarm that devoured everything: metal, stone, flesh. Fleet Admiral Yelquor of the Varnak Confederacy stood tall, all 4 eyes trembling, his tendrils twitching nervously as the casualty reports scrolled through the air. Every strategy had failed. The Skarath adapted too fast, multiplied too fast, and the Concord species, peaceful and diplomatic by design, were not prepared for this kind of enemy. The chamber fell silent as the emergency protocol was whispered. Across delegates' feeds, Protocol Black, a relic from before the Concord's golden age, a last resort measure no one had dared activate. It authorized contact with the unregistered combat species, the ones too violent, too unpredictable to integrate into the Concord. At the top of that list was Earth, home of the humans. A Class 12 Deathworld, no Concord ship had entered in 100 cycles. Earth was infamous. Its ecosystem was lethal, its atmosphere volatile, and its dominant species, humans, were considered unstable. Too emotional, too aggressive, too dangerous. But the Skarath didn't care about rules. They were a force of extinction, and desperation left no room for pride. With trembling fingers, Ambassador Kellett of the Thaler League activated the beacon, sending a tight beam-coded transmission straight toward Sol. To Earth Command, this is the Galactic Concord. We request aid. We are dying. The chamber waited. Seconds turned to minutes. Someone whispered that humans would never respond. Others prayed that they wouldn't. But just before the hour struck, space around Concord Prime rippled. A single vessel dropped out of faster than light, but it wasn't like any Concord ship. It was boxy, blackened by burn marks, ugly and bristling with weapons, an old war cruiser, human by design. On its hull, painted in faded red, was a name: ISS Vengeance. Inside, Commander Nyla Shaw stared at the tactical readouts, her grey eyes cold, calculating. Her voice, calm but sharp, cut through the silence as she opened a channel to the Concord. Backup has arrived. Status report. Her tone didn't ask permission. It demanded answers. The chamber panicked. Delegates argued. Surely this was a misunderstanding. One ship. This wasn't the massive fleet they had imagined. But then the scans came in. This wasn't a standard human vessel. It had been retrofitted, upgraded with unknown tech, and carried weapons rated beyond anything in the Concord's database. The crew, enhanced, armored, and grinning like they couldn't wait to get their boots on the ground. When questioned, Commander Shaw simply said, "This is a scout. The others are coming. We hit first. We hit hard, then we clean up." The Concord objected. There were rules, procedures, meetings, but the humans didn't wait. The ISS Vengeance turned toward a Skarath-infested world, Gorath 9, and jumped. No permission, no alliance papers signed, just war. Hours later, the footage came in. It showed human drop pods screaming through the atmosphere like meteorites, smashing into the surface with brute force. Soldiers in black armor stormed out, guns blazing, moving with terrifying coordination. They didn't defend, they attacked. They burned the hives, shot the queens, rigged explosive traps that turned Skarath tunnels into death chambers. One by one, the insectoid masses fell. The Concord watched in horror and awe. For the first time since the war began, the Skarath retreated from a battlefield. They weren't just beaten, they were afraid. Commander Shaw's face appeared again, bloodied, dust-covered. A small smile tugging at her lip as she sent a single message back to Concord Prime. "You called for backup. Now watch how Deathworlders fight." The chamber went silent. The war had just changed. And deep in the darkness between stars, Earth's other warships began to move. The stars shimmered above the ruined skies of Gorath 9, but no one admired them. Not the scattered survivors, not the shattered Concord scouts, and certainly not the black-armored humans who moved like ghosts through the ash-covered ruins of the Skarath hive. Commander Nyla Shaw stood at the edge of a blasted crater, her eyes scanning the horizon as her boots sank into scorched soil. Behind her, the ISS Vengeance hovered silently, its hull pitted and scorched, its weapon arrays still warm from the bombardment. Word had spread across the Concord like wildfire. The humans had taken a hive world in a single day. Delegates whispered about them, some with hope, others with fear. But none could deny it. Humanity had done what no other species could. Still, the question hung heavy in the air. Was this all they had? One ship, one strike? If so, the Concord might survive a little longer, but it would still fall. That question was answered just 6 hours later, when the sky above Concord Prime tore open again. Not one, but 10 human ships emerged, each different in shape and size, some long and thin like spears, others thick and brutal like sledgehammers. These weren't regular warships. They were specialized, modified for different kinds of war. On board were the Outliers, Earth's second wave, soldiers pulled from the worst places on the planet, trained in the deadliest environments, forged by struggle. Each unit had a name and a history written in blood. The conquered delegations scrambled to respond, sending greeting fleets and peace envoys, but they were ignored. Humans didn't waste time with speeches. The Outlier ships split, each heading to a separate front where the Skarath was strongest. One vessel, the Hellfire Bastion, dropped into orbit over Ulax 3, a jungle world overrun for months. The planet's defenders had called for retreat. Humans denied it. They deployed troops known as the Scorchers, experts in close-quarters jungle combat, who moved silently through thick foliage with flamethrowers and drones that mimicked insects to infiltrate nests. The first Skarath nest burned within 2 hours. On Turnix 5, an ice-covered moon where the cold killed faster than bullets, the polar wrath arrived. The team on board, called the Frostborn, walked onto the frozen battlefield wearing heat armor powered by geothermal vents. They hunted the Skarath through blizzards, using seismic charges to collapse tunnels and trap entire broods beneath the ice. One Frostborn soldier, covered in frostbite and scars, carved a message into the snow near the extraction point. Let it come. We're colder than fear. On the desert world of Kaldrax 7, a planet so hot and dry that electronics melted without. Shielding, the Dustwalker, a low-flying carrier, released its troops. Humans born in Earth's burning deserts, used to dust storms and dehydration. They fought in silence, wearing sand-colored suits that blended with the dunes, sniping Skarath from miles away and laying traps buried beneath the sand. Survivors of other species watched in disbelief as the humans adapted, turning each world into a weapon. Commander Shaw didn't join the missions, but she coordinated everything. She watched the feeds, listened to radio chatter, read the casualty reports. Her face remained calm, but her voice was firm when she spoke to Concord High Command. This is not random violence. This is controlled destruction. We don't push back. We eliminate. The Concord leaders met in panic. They didn't know what to fear more, the Skarath or what the humans might become once the war was over. One delegate suggested slowing the humans down, putting limits on their deployment. But by the time that motion was raised, the humans had already landed on 13 more planets. Wherever they went, they pushed the Skarath back, using tactics no Concord species had even imagined. They didn't wait for orders. They fought like it was personal, like every planet they stepped on was their own. One Concord scout, a young officer from the Talari species, was assigned to observe the human team, known as Reaper 3. They operated deep inside hostile territory, moving with speed and precision. The scout reported how the humans fought in silence, communicated with hand signals, used makeshift explosives built from alien scrap, and carried strange keepsakes from Earth, photos, symbols, old medals. They carry Earth with them, he wrote in his final report, and when they fight, it's like they're defending home, no matter where they are. That scout didn't make it back. His last message showed Reaper 3 surrounding him, protecting him from a swarm attack. They didn't escape either, but they held the line. A day later, orbital scans showed that the Scarrath hive in that sector had collapsed, not destroyed by a fleet, but taken down by 7 humans, 1 scout, and a mountain of explosives. The footage spread fast. In every corner of the Concorde, in every military outpost, aliens watched the recordings in silence. Some were horrified, others were inspired. For the first time, recruitment rose. Species that had never held a weapon asked to be trained by humans. The outliers began holding drills with non-human troops, teaching them how to improvise, how to resist panic, how to fight back with everything, even if that meant biting, kicking, or throwing rocks when ammo ran dry. "Fight to the last," said Sergeant Marcus Hale during one briefing, "because if they stop you here, they'll eat your people next, and we don't let that happen." His words echoed across battlefields, repeated by alien lips, carved into walls, painted on helmets. The humans weren't just winning, they were changing the war, yet not all saw this as hope. In the shadows of the Concorde's political network, whispers grew louder. What would humans do when the Scarrath were gone? Would they give up power? Would they leave? Or would they become something worse than the enemy? But those fears were pushed aside as the war shifted. Scarrath forces began pulling back. Their hive formations fractured. Their swarm tactics broke. Something had changed in them. They were learning fear. The monsters that had once charged into death now hesitated. Some even fled. Commander Shaw watched it all from the Vengeance, arms crossed behind her back. "They thought they were the apex predators," she muttered to her second-in-command. "They forgot what a death world really means." And above a burning horizon, Earth's fleet grew larger, its shadow stretching across the stars. The outliers had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Smoke curled through the shattered halls of Hive Station Kareth as the air turned heavy with heat and silence, broken only by the distant clicking of Scarrath claws against steel, and the low hum of motionless security drones, now long dead. Deep inside the enemy's main underground structure on Dravok 4, Reaper 3 moved like shadows in a maze of tunnels, their boots silent, weapons ready, eyes glowing faintly behind combat visors as the darkness swallowed them whole. Sergeant Marcus Hale led the way, his face scarred but steady, his voice a whisper in the comms as he guided his team through the heart of one of the deadliest Scarrath strongholds ever recorded. The mission was simple on paper. Get inside, plant seismic destabilizers beneath the hive core and get out. But everyone in Reaper 3 knew there was no coming back. This wasn't a raid. It was a death sentence, wrapped in orders. The Scarrath had dug deep into the crust, building a nest that pulsed with heat and vibration, alive with noise and smell, so thick with pheromones it made the air taste like rot. The Concorde had tried orbital strikes. They'd tried poison gas. Nothing worked. The tunnels absorbed energy like a sponge, and the Scarrath simply rebuilt, stronger each time. That's when Earth's command decided it was time to send in pain, human pain. Reaper 3 was chosen because they didn't break under pressure. Each member had survived impossible missions, lost limbs, lost comrades, but never failed. There was Corporal Juno Ray, small but fast, carrying a custom rig of incendiary bombs on her back, grinning like she was born for chaos. Beside her was Malik, the engineer, who wore his tools like armor and always said, "Anything that can blow up should." Then came Richter, the team's heavy gunner, calm and cold, who never spoke unless bullets weren't enough. The last was Tyr, the youngest, a former street fighter from Earth's ruined mega-slums, whose fists were as deadly as his knife, and who had never stepped back from anything, not even the monsters in his nightmares. Together, they advanced, deeper into the hive, navigating tunnels that twisted like intestines, passing walls coated in Skarath resin that pulsed with hive heat, lighting the space in an eerie red glow. They counted the sounds, clicks, skitters, growls, learning to tell direction from rhythm. Then the first wave came. Dozens of Skarath, jaws wide, claws dripping acid, surged from vents and ceilings, moving with blind fury. Hale gave no order. He didn't need to. The team opened fire, bullets screaming, flames roaring from Juno's rig as the enemy shrieked and burned. Acid splashed, metal hissed, but Reaper 3 didn't stop. They advanced, leaving behind only scorched bodies and melted stone. They moved, like a storm through the underworld. As they got closer to the hive core, the air changed, warmer, heavier, vibrating with a strange, low hum like a heartbeat. Malik set the charges carefully, whispering to the machines like they were children. "We plant them here, here, and there," he said, tapping the map. "Then the whole nest falls." But as they finished setting the last charge, the walls began to shake, not from the bombs, but from something bigger, something waking up. Hale looked up, feeling the pressure in his ears. The Queen was near. Not just a big drone. The Queen, a massive Skarath breeder, protected by armored guards, connected to every other hive mind across 5 systems. Killing her would cripple the enemy in ways orbital strikes never could. Leaving her alive would mean this whole mission was pointless. Hale made the call. "We finish this," he said. "We kill the Queen." They moved fast, guided by instinct and vibration, toward a chamber lit by bioluminescent sacs that pulsed like jellyfish. The Queen was there, huge, grotesque, her body fused to the wall, birthing drones at a sickening pace. Her eyes locked onto the humans, and she screamed, not with sound, but with psychic force that made their ears bleed and helmets crackle. Then her guards charged. The fight was savage. Richter laid down a storm of fire, his minigun spinning, until it smoked, tearing through waves of creatures. Juno tossed bombs in tight arcs, setting the chamber alight. Malik got hit, acid to the arm, but kept working, hacking into the Queen's birthing sac to overload her internal systems with fire. Tyr jumped onto the Queen's spine, stabbing again and again as she shrieked and thrashed, trying to crush him against the wall. Hale fought like a ghost, moving between shadows, shooting with one hand and slashing with the other. Blood sprayed. Bodies dropped. The room turned into a storm of fire and screams. One by one, Reaper 3 fell back, bloodied but alive. Malik was dragging his useless arm. Juno limped, her rig cracked and leaking. Tyr's suit was torn, Richter's ammo was dry. And Hale, he was bleeding from his chest, stabbed through by a claw, but still standing. The Queen screamed again, louder, her body cracking. As Malik's hack took hold, filling her with fire from within, she exploded with a roar that shook the hive to its roots. The ceiling split, the ground buckled, the hive began to collapse. There was no time to run. Hale looked at the others and knew they wouldn't make it, so he gave one final order: "Get the charges live, I'll hold them off." No one argued. Malik activated the detonators. Juno laid down her last bombs. Tyr and Richter formed a wall at the exit, and Hale turned back into the chamber, limping, gun raised. As more Skarath poured in, he smiled bitterly. "Let's dance," he whispered. Then the world went white. On the surface, the ground cracked like glass. The entire hive sank, roaring as tunnels imploded and fire erupted from deep below. Concord scouts watched from the ridge, their eyes wide. No airstrike had ever done that. No species had ever walked into a hive that deep and come out. A signal beeped on the Concord console. One survivor. Just one. It was Tyr, burned, barely, breathing, carrying a cracked helmet with Hale's name etched into it. He dropped it at the Concord officer's feet and said, "We did it. The Queen's dead. Don't waste it." Then he collapsed. The story spread fast. Whole systems heard. For the first time in the war, a hive had been destroyed from the inside. The Scarrath began to retreat. They learned something new. Humans didn't fear death. They used it. And the galaxy learned a new rule. Never let a Reaper team in your house, because they won't just fight. They'll bring pain with them. Pain you'll never forget. The stars above Varos 7 flickered like dying embers as the last Scarrath dreadship fled into deep space, its engines sputtering fire across the night sky, leaving behind a battlefield covered in smoke, blood, and shattered metal, while humans stood silent in the ash, breathing heavy but standing tall, watching the enemy retreat for the first time in the war. Commander Nyla Shaw, now leading from the front lines aboard the war carrier Deliverance, stood on the command deck and watched it all unfold with sharp, unblinking eyes. She had seen countless battles, survived the fall of cities and the collapse of moons. But this moment felt different. The tide was turning. The enemy that once devoured planets without mercy was now running, not from fleets, not from firepower, but from fear. Fear of humans, fear of Deathworlders who fought like demons and refused to break. And it hadn't come easy. Every inch of progress had been bought with blood, thousands lost, heroes buried, whole squads wiped out to buy another hour of resistance. But Earth didn't stop. Earth sent more. With each loss, the outliers returned stronger, adapting faster, hitting harder. Scarrath hive movements had become desperate, uncoordinated. Their advance had stalled on 5 fronts. Concord analysts couldn't believe the data, but the evidence was clear. The Scarrath were losing. On Kirellan 3, a critical supply world, once thought lost, humans launched a surprise strike. They didn't wait for orbital support. Instead, they dropped in at night, boots first, flying low in silent craft covered in radar-reflective plating, landing right in the middle of enemy territory. The unit was called Ghostfire 6, trained in zero-light, zero-noise warfare. They moved through the ruins like whispers, placing charges in key tunnels, disrupting hive signals, cutting power lines, then vanishing before Scarrath could react. By dawn, the enemy hive had gone dark. Not one soldier lost, not one trace left behind. On the ice planet Meltrax 8, where blizzards killed drones faster than bullets, Frostborn teams finally cracked the enemy's polar hives using seismic disruptors buried deep beneath the crust. Concord engineers watched in awe as the ice split, open, swallowing entire Scarrath nests. In orbit, alien commanders sent cautious messages to Earth teams, requesting training, not orders, but lessons. They had seen how humans fought. Now they wanted to learn. Commander Shaw approved every request. "Let them train," she said, "because this isn't just about us anymore. This is everyone's war now." Reaper 3's sacrifice had become legend. New recruits painted their helmets in the team's signature black and red, whispering Hale's last words like a prayer before battle. "Get the charges live. I'll hold them off." Entire fleets used that line as a battle code, a signal to strike without hesitation. The war had changed. The galaxy no longer saw Earth as just another ally. They saw Earth as the edge of the blade. Still, the enemy was not beaten. The Scarrath may have faltered, but they were not finished. Deep in the void, their queens called for unity. A new hive, greater than any before, was forming near the edge of known space. Scouts reported strange signals, massive heat signatures, strange energy pulses, entire asteroid belts vanishing overnight. Something was coming, something worse. But now, the galaxy had hope. On board the Deliverance, Shaw received a coded message from the front lines, an old emergency signal used only by Earth's most secret teams. The signal was from a squad long thought lost, Vortex 1, specialists in deep void infiltration. No one had heard from them in months. Most believed them dead. But now their signal was active, broadcasting a single phrase. "We found it." Shaw stood frozen, the words echoing in her mind. The location of the central hive, the core, the place the Skarath queens were born. If they could strike it, this war could finally end. But such a mission meant suicide. No one had ever reached that deep into Skarath space. Concord leadership hesitated. Their fleets were stretched thin. Losses had mounted. The idea of risking everything on one final assault was too much for some. But not for Earth. Within hours of the signal, Earth's High Command launched Operation Final Ember. Not just one ship, a fleet. The largest human deployment in history. Carriers, stealth cruisers, drop teams, AI-controlled support craft. Every outlier squad was recalled, refitted, and deployed. From all corners of the galaxy, humans gathered in silence. They didn't give speeches. They didn't cheer. They prepared. Commander Shaw led the assault herself, choosing to ride aboard the Valkyrie, a ship built for speed, stealth, and punishment. Every crew member on board had seen at least 5 deployments. Some had lost eyes, limbs, even memories. All had volunteered. The fleet passed into Skarath space without fanfare. No music, no lights, just cold engines and quiet focus. As they neared the hive core, strange energy patterns began to scramble sensors. Drones fried mid-flight, static filled the comms. The void grew darker, but still they advanced. The enemy came at them with everything. Massive dreadships covered in spines, drones moving like waves, entire planets turned into traps. But the humans didn't slow down. They punched through, carving a path with brute force and precision. Strikes. Ghost teams infiltrated hive satellites. Bombers shattered moon-sized fortresses. Ground teams landed in waves, moving like storms across the surface. The final push came just as the core was revealed, a massive living structure hidden. Inside, a fractured planet, pulsing like a beating heart, guarded by 3 queens and millions of drones. The humans didn't flinch. They launched the drop pods. One after another, soldiers fell toward the surface like fire from heaven. Inside each pod was a warrior ready to give everything. The first wave was led by Frostborn, the second by Scorchers. The third by a new team, Echo 9, formed from survivors of every major battle since Gorath 9, and at the head of it all was Shaw, her armor painted black, her weapon glowing red. As her pod struck the ground, sending shockwaves through the hive, she rose slowly and stared. Into the dark. "Let's finish this," she said. Then she charged forward, leading the final battle into the heart of the enemy. The tide had turned, and now it was time to end the war. The ground of the hive world cracked open like glass. Under pressure, as the first wave of Earth's Deathworlders dropped from orbit, their pods slamming into the surface with the force of meteor strikes, sending shockwaves through the twisted black soil and rupturing the hardened resin that coated the Skarath stronghold like a living shell. And when the doors of the pods exploded outward, what emerged was not just soldiers. It was rage, it was vengeance, it was humanity's fury made real in fire, steel, and blood. The Deathworlders had no special armor beyond what they needed, no flashy technology, no protective barriers from the horrors of war. They relied on grit, instinct, and pain, moving as one through the chaos with faces hard as stone and eyes cold as space. They were the ones who had trained on Earth's most brutal continents, where storms stripped skin and beasts hunted in packs, where poison was common and weakness was death. And now they stood under the black sky of the Skarath core world, surrounded by shrieking alien hordes and firestorms of energy blasts, and they simply charged. The Skarath, once feared across the stars, poured out of the tunnels and hives in endless waves, hissing and clicking, moving like insects, swarming with speed and fury. But the Deathworlders didn't slow down. They met the tide head-on. shoulder to shoulder, unleashing bullets, blades, and brutal hand-to-hand violence that broke the front lines in minutes. Every squad had a task, and every soldier knew their role. Reaver units breached hive gates with thermal lances, slam-fire teams planted seismic charges beneath support pillars, Ghostborn operatives disappeared into the shadows to strike at command. Nodes buried deep in the flesh of the hive walls, while high above, Concord and Earth ships rained, covering fire in precise arcs, guided by neural-linked spotters on the ground. Commander Nyla Shaw led the main spearhead, her armor scorched and scarred, moving without hesitation through the narrow tunnels that reeked of death and decay, her team pressing deeper with every step, clearing room after room with ruthless efficiency. Every kill was earned, every corner was a risk. They passed the bodies of other species, slaughtered Concord troops, half-digested prisoners, failed attacks that had tried and failed before Earth had arrived. Now, the Deathworlders marched through the same corridors and made it farther than any force before them, driven by the simple fact that retreat wasn't in their blood. The Skar-Ath Queen's defenders, massive creatures armored in bone and grown for close combat, met them at choke points, roaring in rage, swinging scythe-like, limbs that shattered walls and sliced stone, but Earth's champions didn't break. Richter, the Reaper 3 survivor turned instructor, led a detachment into the Queen's antechamber with his heavy rifle, cutting down the guards one by one while his team set charges under the Queen's egg clusters, leaving nothing behind but fire. Juno Ray, long thought dead, returned from Black Ops exile to join Echo 9, bringing experimental heat packs that ignited Skarath resin on contact, turning the hive's outer shell into molten slag. Malik, missing an arm and carrying burns over half his body, worked with AI-guided drones to reroute Skarath pheromone trails, causing entire defense waves to turn on each other in confusion. Tyre, now a legend among Deathworlder rookies, broke through an elite guard formation with nothing but a broken blade and his fists, bloodied but grinning. And in the center of it all, Shaw pushed forward through fire and ruin, guiding her troops straight into the Queen's lair, a living chamber pulsing with sickly light, where walls bled and the floor shifted like flesh. And at its heart sat the Queen herself, larger than any recorded, her body fused to a living throne of Skarath biomass, her eyes glowing with hatred, her voice a low, psychic hum that shook their thoughts and sent visions of fear crawling into their minds. But Deathworlders had seen worse. They had known fear on Earth in its purest form and survived. They advanced. The Queen shrieked, sending waves of drones, but the team held the line. Shaw threw the first thermal grenade, lighting the base of the Queen's throne with roaring flame. Her guards rushed in, claws flashing, acid spraying, but the Deathworlders didn't fall. They fought, teeth clenched, blades swinging, every move calculated to hurt, to bleed, to break. The room became a storm of screams and fire, and the Queen howled as her throne cracked under the pressure of seismic charges set by Malik and primed by Juno's final countdown. Shaw faced her at last, eyes locked with the massive creature's hateful gaze, and she raised her weapon without hesitation. "This is for Earth," she said, and pulled the trigger, sending a rail spike straight through the Queen's eye. As the creature convulsed, screaming, the charges went off, tearing the lair apart in a single thunderous roar that collapsed the entire upper hive into itself. Outside, Skarath ships stopped moving. Their drones froze. Across multiple planets, hives went silent. The signal had been cut. The core hive was dead. On the Valkyrie orbiting above, the silence was complete as command officers stared at. Monitors now empty of red signals. Then one beeped. A single transmission, voice only. "Objective complete," said Shaw's voice, hoarse but steady. "Queen neutralized. Hive collapsing. Casualties heavy. Survivors en route." The bridge exploded in cheers. Other Concord ships picked up the signal and relayed it across known space. Civilizations erupted with joy. On Earth, people cried and shouted in the streets. On Allied worlds, monuments were built that same day. The war wasn't over yet, but it was no longer a question of survival. It was a matter of time, and everyone knew why, because the Deathworlders had arrived. And they had shown the galaxy what humanity was really made of. The hive world burned behind them as the last transport ships pulled free from the broken skies, the cracked surface below collapsing in on itself with thunderous groans. And deep, under the crust, the ruins of the Skarath Queen's throne room sank into blackness, silent at last. The war was not over, but the heart of the enemy was gone, and that changed everything. Across the galaxy, the shock was immediate. On distant Concord outposts once under siege, Skarath drones froze mid-attack, their connection to the hive suddenly lost, and without guidance they flailed, confused, vulnerable, easy to pick off. Civilian ships that had been hiding in asteroid belts emerged cautiously, blinking lights in coded gratitude to Earth's forces as news spread. But the humans didn't celebrate yet. On the Valkyrie, Commander Shaw stood quietly in the medical bay, staring at the rows of beds lined with wounded Deathworlders, many unconscious, some missing limbs, all covered in dirt, blood, and burns. Victory had come at a price, and it showed. In the hollow looks of the survivors, Shaw herself had a deep gash across her side and burns on her arms, but she refused treatment until the last of her team had been pulled from the wreckage. Nearby, Reaper 3's colors were painted on the wall, joined by Echo 9's, Ghostborn's, and dozens of other squad logos. Some had been wiped out, others shattered and reformed, but every unit had played a part in the fall of the hive. In conquered command centers, leaders from 100 worlds reviewed the data, struggling to understand how Earth soldiers had done what no one else had managed in over a decade of war. They watched footage of the Queen's death. They listened to the final transmissions from inside the hive. Some cried, some sat in stunned silence, and others, the ones who had doubted humanity from the start, now whispered new plans. What would happen when the Deathworlders turned home again? Could such a force ever be controlled? But Earth's soldiers didn't care for politics. They returned to base quiet, tired, not as heroes, but as people who had done what needed to be done. On the rebuilt outpost at Gorath 9, once a graveyard of Concord dreams, new banners were raised. Survivors from other species gathered to honor the fallen. One by one, they placed names on a towering wall of steel. No ranks, no flags, just names. Shaw placed Hale's name herself, brushing dust from the metal, then stood back as others followed. There were no speeches, only silence. But even as the galaxy paused to breathe, something dark moved beneath the surface. Far from known space, near the shattered edge of the Skarath Empire, deep scans picked up strange energy readings, pulses of activity that didn't match any known hive signal. On a small moon orbiting a dead star, conquered scouts found strange remains. Skarath drones not deactivated but changed, metal fused to bone, synthetic implants woven into their skin, new symbols burned into their shells. These weren't just survivors. They were evolving, and they weren't alone. The signals suggested something else, something old, something never seen before, guiding them. Earth analysts called it a rogue fragment, a mind shard, a backup perhaps of the Skarath Queen's thoughts, preserved in deep code, and now infecting a new host, a virus with purpose. Concord called for containment, but Shaw and the Deathworlders knew better. Containment meant delay. Delay meant more death. She called her team back together. Some were still recovering. Others had barely made it out alive. But they answered. Frostborn returned with their ice-stained armor. Ghostborn rearmed with new tech. Echo 9, fewer now but more determined than ever, volunteered first. "It's not over," Shaw told them, standing in the shadows of the command room, her voice quiet but steady. "Not yet. But we finish what we start." She didn't need to say more. The message was clear. The Skarath weren't done, and now something darker wore their skin. The final aftershock of the war had begun, not with fleets or hive swarms, but with whispers and signals deep in the void. But the Deathworlders were ready. The galaxy had seen what they could do when pushed. Now it would see what they became when they hunted.